Green go. Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Michael. Pleasure to be here. Oh, there we go. Okay, if you guys want the slides, I have put a link here so you can have them all. It's very easy to do. So what is a DataDAO? So the idea is right now there's all this infrastructure that's on the internet, and we want databases. There are these important pieces of middleware. So what we did is we created a database DAO. So imagine instead of every database is its own DAO, where everyone that contributes to the database gets partial ownership of what's inside the database. So at the end of it, what we kind of get is a combination of Pinterest together with Mechanical Turk, together with MongoDB, together with IPFS. And I'm going to explain a little bit about how all these things fit together to create this new database middleware layer protocol. So today when you make a database, you sort of just spin up like MongoDB or Postgres, and it runs on a centralized server, and it's very standard. And there's no way to sort of curate or set a level or threshold at which point you want certain types of content to be there or you don't want certain types of content to be there. And this is something that is very beneficial. So examples, Reddit is there's stuff that is obviously spam, and you want to be able to quickly remove that type of content. Or there's other things where you want really, really highly curated types of content, like Hacker News or something, and you want only comments above a certain threshold or above a certain intellectual ability to be there. But right now, when everything is on a centralized server, you have to rely on sort of the database administrator to do that, and there's no way to sort of leverage the crowd to participate in that database curation process. So where would this be useful is one of the applications, I'll explain just motivating use case, is we're working together with LabDAO and SciDAO to do a large-scale research study on psychedelics, and it's going to everyone who contributes to this database is going to get rewarded for the work that they do. Now there's just many types of other databases that exist on. There's so many that you can't even possibly list them all, but basically every database online is sort of an example of curated sets of content and then people being charged for that types of content. So Netflix is Netflix Central. What they do is they find a bunch of movies that are interesting to them, they curate them, and then they charge people a subscription, and then that subscription goes out to the people that sort of made the movies. And that's in a very centralized way. Now we sort of say, is there a way to decentralize that process? So I'm just going to give you a very high-level overview. So if there's only one slide, this makes it easy to understand. So a DBDAO is a database, and it makes every database is created into a DAO. And every row within that database is an NFT. So everyone who contributes everyone who contributes to the database can keep track of what they contributed. And then sort of as the database monetizes through ads or through subscriptions or through other types of money, the money is then split out to all the different owners of the database, everyone who's contributed an NFT. So what's cool is this incentivizes people to contribute. And what we're doing is we're aligning the economic interests of the contributors of a database with the people that are with the database itself, and we're sort of aligning the interests of all these different parties. And this is very different from the economic incentives of Facebook or Instagram, where people are sort of incentivized to create fringe content, and that's the type of content that monetizes well. But the incentives aren't very aligned there. So the business, and then lastly, what makes this work from a business perspective is that we're coordinating many pieces of data together. And one piece of data on its own is sort of useless. But when you contribute many pieces of data together, you're able to generate more insights to be drawn from it, and the sum is more than the parts. The sum is more than the parts, and the parts is more than whatever. And we're able to create value that way and then share that value with everyone that contributed. So just to give a quick overview of sort of the differences between a decentralized database and a centralized database is comparing a decentralized database like DBDAO, which we created, to Postgres is decentralized databases incentivize people to share. So you make money when you share your stuff. You receive credit for it. Because it's all on the blockchain, it's very interoperable. So if you are working in a scientific setting, You want to move between different labs, and you need to be able to track where data was originally created and then move it into another database. This is very hard on centralized systems, but on decentralized systems, it's relatively easy because every piece of data is an NFT. On centralized databases, the administrator of the database is not incentivized to do a good job. No one's keeping track of if Facebook or if Instagram is doing a good job of moderating content. Whereas on a decentralized database, everything is out in the open, so people can track and make sure and audit that the types of content that are being taken down or removed are the right types of content. On a decentralized database, we're incentivizing good content and disincentivizing bad content, and that's very different from a centralized database where everything is just sort of, there's no incentives in either way. And so this is the whole premise of this sort of project is that in the future, data is going to be monetized in a much different way. The idea that you contribute data and then you don't get any money back is very wrong. And with this idea of this negative, like in some ways, like what happens is when you post data on AWS, you have to pay a small fee. In the vision of the future, we're going to have like negatively priced data, which that means is like instead of having to pay for data to be contributed somewhere, you're going to get paid for data. And so then this whole project is sort of built out from that supposition. So the first thing is like, how do we pay people? And then the second big question that arises is, okay, if you're getting paid for data, what prevents someone from just generating a lot of white noise and just spamming the database and trying to earn money and Sybil attack it? So this is sort of the basic overview of how it works initially without the spam. So you have a database of data, it's like just in a really simple example, and it's monetized through ads or through subscriptions or through selling the data or through someone who just wants to pay and collect a lot of data for some reason or affiliate links. There's many different ways to monetize the database. And so what happens is all the money goes in here and then it just shoots out to the people that contributed to the database. Now, what happens is Bob realizes that the more he contributes to the database, the more money he's going to make. So he just starts adding a bunch of spam rows to the database. And now he makes another, there's $4 signs going in, and now instead before he had $2 signs, and now he makes more dollar signs. So this makes Alice very sad. So she adds more spam to the database as well, and she now gets half the data, the money. But this, of course, makes the people that are paying, because now the people that are paying for bad content. So this is bad. So what we do is we introduce the concept of a curator. And the job of the curator is they're the person that mints the database. And what we want to do is we want to incentivize the curator with money so that the better job they do of curating a data set, the more money they're going to make, the more valuable their data set is going to be. So the curator is the one that has the idea for the database, and they create the database. And the curators actually, there's a slight thing here. There's the creator of the database, and then there's the curator. And for this purpose of this discussion, we're just going to assume that those two are the same. But down the road, the person that creates the database will be slightly different than the curator of the database. So anybody can be a curator. Like you just go to become a curator, you just go to the website, you mint a database, and then you're the curator of that database. And then you try and attract users to it. And the idea is with many different types of curators out there, you have like a laboratory of democracy, where you're having curators competing with each other to be like the most fair, the most just curators. It's kind of like how the United States is. In theory, each state is supposed to compete with each other to create the best laws and attract the most people. And so the curators that do a good job are the ones that attract the most users. So here's how the curation works. So we want to prevent spam. So what happens is when the curator has their database here, and Dave has a row that he wants to submit to the database. Now what he does is he has his row, and he has to submit a small stake along with that row. So that's just a small amount of money that is set by the creator of the curator at mint time. It's on the orders of magnitude to like a penny up to $1, say. So they have the row here, and he submits it. And so Dave has them, he gets submitted, and he's like temporary, he's in purgatory here. But you can see now the data is in the database, but so is the money. So what happens next is the row gets approved, and then the money gets shipped back to Dave. So now Dave, because the row is approved, he gets his money back. Now let's look at another example here. So now he tries to submit the row buy my NFTs, which is spam, and so it gets submitted here. The row is not approved, but now Dave has lost his money. Oops. Dave doesn't get his money back, and he loses that stake. So why this is good is it disincentivizes Dave from spamming the database. If Dave wants to like post a bunch of random stuff on Facebook that is like not okay, that is not within the terms of service, he's willing to do. That's allowed. But the problem then is that he's basically just like paying. He's just like, if he wants to post bad stuff, that's fine. But he just ends up losing a lot of money. So he's not going to do that because he knows what's going to happen. So I want to talk a little bit more about the role of the curator here. So the role of the curator has right now been just one individual person. But it's actually a bit more complicated than that. So what we do is it's not one individual person, it's one individual address. And what we do is we link that up to a Gnosis safe, which is a multi-sig. So now the role of the curator can take many different forms. So it can be one trusted person, it could be a team of people, it could be a jury, it could be a mechanical Turk where you're just like paying someone else to curate your database for you. You don't care, you just want to pay someone else to do it for you. Or it can also be an AI. So you could train an AI to automatically accept or reject certain types of content. And this idea was like borrowed from a Vitalik. He sort of had this idea that if you want to curate great content on Reddit, what you should do is you should just attach the Reddit page to an address and allow the innovation to happen on the other side of that. So we sort of borrow that idea, and each row just goes into this black box, which is the multi-sig, and then that black box just has an accept or reject output. So what do we do if the curator becomes corrupt? You don't want to be participating in a system where the curator is obviously fraudulent. So what we do instead is we have a system for detecting corrupt curators, and we have this idea of the log chain. So the more decisions that a curator has done, the more trusted they are. And so you can see a longer decision history gives someone more certainty that the curator is going to be honest. It's like an Uber ride. If an Uber comes in and only has one ride, you might be a little scared, but if you've seen they've done 15,000 rides, you can trust them. And then what's interesting is like, yes, you could in theory look at each individual record and see, okay, this was a bad decision that the curator made in rejecting a row. But what we anticipate is someone's probably going to, because this is all on chain, it's all easily accessible through API. And I think this is a really great opportunity for training your own GPT-3 or AI to automatically to detect which decisions were bad. Now I just want to talk a little bit about the rows in the database. What's really interesting is each row in this database is an NFT. So when you create a row and you add it to the database, what you're actually doing is minting an 1155 token. Now, what's cool is you can then see it on OpenSea and you can buy, sell, or trade it. But what's also so in order to make this really useful is that NFT has to be part of a schema. So we rely heavily on schema.org to allow people to say the structure of their database. Because each NFT is well structured, each row can actually be added to multiple different data sets. So you could have one picture of a cat and have it go into a stock photos app and a social catstagram app and also a clinical trial. And then all of those different databases, if they generate revenue, will go back to that one NFT. Now, that one NFT, because it's an NFT, can easily be bought and sold, and it's just a token. So what's cool is you can then apply, what DeFi does is it takes interesting economic incentives and applies them to tokens. Now, that token is oftentimes backed by the future promise of a protocol or something. But what we do is we say we have data in a NFT, and it's a token, so you can plug that same stuff. It's all super interoperable, and what you can do is you can you can say, I own this very valuable cat row, and I'm going to use it as a DeFi protocol and then take a loan out based on the cash flow that row is generating. So we talked a little about now how do we reward people. So as the database monetizes, we want to be able to split the money that comes in through the different people that help to create the database. So if one specific database monetizes, the network thus take 10% to help fund the future stuff. The curator, so the person that minted the database and the people that do the accepting and rejecting of rows are generating 30% of the reward pool. Then the scouts generate 60%, which is basically the people that contributed the actual data to the database. And then we are also playing around with this idea of giving 5% back to the viewer of the database. And what's interesting about this is it's kind of like the BAT token in Brave. So you're rewarding people that participate in the system to people that actively view the ads get a small kickback as well. And I think this is a very cool idea. So, now we want to talk a little bit about, that's the high level how the revenue is split. But you also want to dive down more deeply in how the revenue is split between the scouts. So the scouts are the people that submit rows. Now, some rows are just, even though they're accepted into the database, are going to be more valuable than other rows. Now, one row, the easiest way to split the revenue of that 60% that's generated between people is just to take all that money and the 60%, take the number of rows, divide it by the total amount that's generated. But there's actually more advanced ways of doing it where you could do it on a query basis. So you could see which rows are touched during a query. But you could also use this thing that we've been playing around with called the Shapely value, which is basically looking to see what value does that row contribute that isn't contributed by other rows. So you could sort of get an idea of how much benefit, of what the information benefit to your row is contributing to a database, and then reward people who are finding. So an example of a medical use case, if say you're training an AI on different diseases, if someone has a very rare disease that contributes a lot more relative data, you want to reward that person more. So that would do that. So what's interesting is just from an analysis perspective here is we're aligning the interests of the curators and the viewers and the scouts, and we're also incentivizing the curators to do a good job of curating. And no other sort of system does that now, so that's kind of cool. It widens who can participate. These databases are open, and so anyone can be a curator and anyone can be a participant. So we're widening that up. It's Sybil proof, so nowhere in this thing did we use reputation or proof of person to to determine how this protocol was done. We have at each level we have different actors competing with each other, so that you have a marketplace of different types of content. And we have this threat of this staking system in the database creates the threat of moderation, which you hope the reason people post bad stuff on Facebook is because they know they're never going to get moderated. But if you have a system that's actively useful in protecting the system, people are much less likely to post bad content, actually. We encourage APIs. We encourage API and bot usage. Anything that can be done by an AI or a bot should be. So every part of the system is very interoperable and can be done either by a person or by an AI. And lastly is we make no judgment around the types of content that are either good or bad at the protocol level. All that sort of stuff is done at the curator level and at the people level. So only databases that are good, so the people sort of have the power to choose what is the good and bad content, and they don't have to rely on a central entity to sort of make those decisions. I will give a demo of how it works here. Oops. Can someone press the play button? Okay, so what we have here is we have our website that we have created here, and what it starts with is let me see. Do it. Oh. So we start by having the database. We say the name of the database, the deposit per row. This is the schema that is going on. Then we describe the schema of the way the database should look, the types of data that it's going to accept. We mint the database here. We can see MetaMask pops up, and we just confirm that transaction. We're running on Arbitrum and Avalanche currently. So we've minted the database. We can see on the Block Explorer that it's minted properly. Everything is very fast here. This is all real time. We go to the database. We add a row. So this is for the clinical trial that we're doing with LabDAO and SciDAO. We input the data. We again write that to the chain, and this is actually minting an 1155 NFT. And then you can see it here. We usually will keep it there, but if for some reason this isn't a good piece of data, this is the admin view here. So we have the ability to remove that data set, that row from the database. And that's sort of how it works. Then just some last minute details here. So this is like a drop-in replacement. You can just drop it into any C or SQL thing, like you can just take your Mongo and drop in our DBDAO instead. And so it's a really great way of like migrating Web 2 apps into Web 3. So if you have a Web 2 app that's doing well and you want to hypercharge it by incentivizing your user base, when you install this at the base level, at the database level protocol, you don't have to worry about sort of all the incentivization. That's all sort of handled automatically. We just released a white label app, which is cool. So you can download that on GitHub, and it makes it very easy to integrate with the system. I'll have a link to that in the last slide. We're integrated with Rainbow Wallet as part of the white label app. We're agnostic to the size of the data, so we integrate with IPFS and we generate a CID, and that's what's stored in the contract. So all our transactions, because we're on Arweave, on Avalanche, and we use IPFS, are very, very fast and like under a penny, and we can do things to even streamline that further. We're integrated with Gnosis Safe in order that works well to integrate teams to be the curator. Schema.org, we're going to develop an even deeper integration with, and we're integrating with Lit Protocol soon to enable private fields on the database as well. And that's it. So if you want to find our website here, if you have any feedback, this is my Telegram, and you can find the slides here. And we have our GitHub white label app here, and if you are looking for a job, we are hiring as well.